They fined me $750 for a view obstruction after I replaced my broken dock light. Never mind that the same bulb had been there 15 years. 3 days later, the HOA president drove past my property twice, slow and smiling. That's when I started saving everything: emails, letters, dates. Welcome to HOA Society. I'm Daniel Price, a civil engineer from northern Georgia who thought the worst fights in life happened on job sites, not cul-de-sacs. If you've ever dealt with an HOA, you know what kind of power hides in paperwork. And if you haven't, buckle up, because you're about to see how one went too far. I'm glad you're here. Before we start, tell me, where are you watching from? I like picturing these stories traveling across neighborhoods like warning flares. It began 6 months after my wife passed. Cancer, 48 years old. The lake house was the one place she made me promise to keep, for the grandkids someday. That was the promise that kept me working double hours, rebuilding everything myself: deck boards, railing, even the tiny patch of sand she called our pocket beach. The HOA sent their first warning the same week I finished staining it. Non-conforming color, tone exceeds approved range. It was cedar brown, the same color as half the docks on the lake. At first, I thought it was a clerical error. I even walked down to the association office, little tan trailer near the mail kiosk, holding the notice and my receipt for approved color palette C4 brown. The clerk, some college kid, said he'd pass it to the board. But the next week, I got another envelope. Failure to correct violation, $250 fine. That's when I met Linda Markham, HOA president, self-appointed guardian of Lake Serenity's visual integrity. She showed up at my gate wearing mirrored sunglasses and a bright pink visor. "We have standards, Mr. Price," she said, "and lately you've been testing them." She gestured at my dock like it was graffiti. I told her the color matched code C4. She said, "Maybe, but codes evolve." "Evolve?" I asked. "You mean you just changed them?" Her lips twitched. "You'll get the new supplement soon. Meanwhile, compliance is expected." Then she smiled that small, tight smile bureaucrats master. A smile that says, "You can't touch me." When the supplement arrived, the rule was dated 2 days after my first notice. I was grandfathered in by any fair measure, but fairness doesn't always factor into HOA logic. So I appealed, formally, in writing. That's when the real fun started. They scheduled my hearing for 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday, knowing I worked until 5. When I requested a reschedule, the reply said, "Attendance optional, decision final." The board minutes later claimed I declined to attend. Fine upheld, $500 now. Still, I stayed polite. My wife had been the one who always believed in procedure. "Never give them a reason to call you angry," she used to say. But the next morning, I found a bright orange notice of non-compliance stapled to my dock post. 2 words underlined in red: immediate action. I peeled it off, folded it, and placed it in a binder labeled evidence. Date-stamped photos, certified letters, everything. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew one thing: if they wanted a fight, they'd get one documented down to the second. The harassment crept in quietly. First, my trash bins, too visible. Then, mailbox flag non-standard height. A routine property inspection that included someone opening my side gate while I was at work. When I checked my security camera footage, the timestamp read 2:37 p.m., March 8th. HOA truck, logo visible. The next board meeting, I stood at the back as they discussed community safety initiatives. Linda spotted me and said, loud enough for everyone, "We're glad Mr. Price is taking a renewed interest in compliance." A few chuckles. I kept my jaw tight. Afterward, a neighbor named Ruth Alvarez caught me by the parking lot. Retired teacher, sharp as a tack, carried a notebook everywhere. "You're not the first," she said. "They fined me for my wheelchair ramp, said it disrupted symmetry. Took me 6 months to get a variance." She handed me a card. Her son's law partner, Tom Hendricks, municipal attorney. That night, I called him. He listened quietly, tapping keys. "You've got a pattern," he said finally. "Selective enforcement. If we document at least 3 similar violations ignored for others, that's evidence." "Evidence for what?" I asked. "For what comes next," he said. "But patience, Daniel. Let them overreach first." Knowledge nugget number 1. Selective enforcement occurs when an HOA enforces rules against one homeowner but ignores the same infractions by others. Courts view that as arbitrary and often unlawful. Over the next 2 weeks, I started documenting. I measured dock stains with color swatches, snapped photos of 6 neighbors using the same shade as mine. I printed the HOA's online gallery, half the dock cedar brown. Tom smiled when I showed him. "You're building your shield," he said. "Now we find your sword." By mid-April, the HOA sent a final notice before Lien for $1,250. That's when something shifted. I stopped feeling angry and started feeling precise. I opened my laptop, pulled county records, and began tracing parcel IDs. That lakefront wasn't a single HOA-owned parcel. It was a patchwork of old easements, water access rights, and public utility strips. And one tiny plot, 0.13 acres, sat between my dock and the HOA's claimed shoreline. Deeded to Serenity Development Partners LLC, a company dissolved 8 years ago. I stared at the screen for a long time, then opened a new folder labeled Leverage. I spent 3 nights tracing that parcel's chain of title. Each deed linked back to a 1992 subdivision. Ion plat the HOA claimed as its foundation, but the survey overlay told a different story. The 0.13-acre slip of land wasn't conveyed with the rest. It was still technically held in county surplus, which meant any citizen could petition to acquire it through the Abandoned Parcel Claim Act of 2005, a state statute so obscure even most realtors forgot it existed. Tom confirmed it with a grin audible through the phone. "That strips the connective tissue, Daniel. Whoever owns it controls the easement. You buy it, they can't set foot on your dock without permission." The next day, I filed the paperwork through a quiet holding name, North Lake Restoration LLC, just me and a $67 filing fee. The clerk stamped it on May 3, 2024, 9:42 a.m. I didn't breathe easy until I had the provisional deed in hand, embossed seal still warm from the press. My wife would have laughed at the name, Restoration. She always said revenge and restoration are cousins. Depends which side of the ledger you're writing from. I didn't tell anyone except Ruth. She brought me oatmeal cookies and said, "Patience, let them hang themselves on arrogance first." And they did, beautifully. Linda started posting my name on the HOA bulletin, calling me non-compliant homeowner in arrears. They printed it right beside the lost cat notices. I took photos. Then came the cops, yes, actual police, responding to an anonymous noise complaint the night I was alone watching an old Braves game. The officer apologized. He'd been called 3 times that week for false alarms. "Seems like you got yourself a stalker, sir," he said. I offered him coffee. He declined but jotted the report number for me, number 245098. That number would matter later. At the next meeting, I sat quietly until Linda accused me of deliberate defiance and motioned to place a lien on my property. That's when I spoke. "Before you vote," I said, sliding a folder onto the table, "you might want to review Exhibit A. Inside, county map, parcel ID, and a certified copy of the deed, my new holding company's name neatly typed." Linda blinked. "What's this supposed to be?" "The land between your property line and my dock," I said. "It's not HOA jurisdiction anymore. As of May 3rd, it belongs to North Lake Restoration LLC. Her laugh came quick, brittle. "You can't just buy community land." "It wasn't community land," I replied. "It was unclaimed. I followed the statute. You'll find the recording number at the bottom." Silence. Then murmurs. Someone on the board muttered, "Is that legal?" Tom, seated quietly at the back, raised his hand. "It's legal," he said, "and recorded." That was the first time I saw genuine fear flicker across Linda's face. But fear turns to fury fast. The following week, she sent out an email blast to all residents calling me a hostile actor and alleging I'd illegally seized HOA assets. Within 2 days, I counted 7 cars slowing outside my house, phones raised. Someone even dropped a dead fish on my driveway. That's when I added cameras, 6 of them, overlapping zones, 1080p, motion activated. Every beep of the system comforted me like a heartbeat. I documented every trespass. 2 mornings later, I woke to find an inspector tagging my mailbox again. "HOA request," he said, shrugging. I asked for ID, photographed his badge. The timestamp read 07:13 a.m., and the citation said, mailbox paint non-reflective, $100 fine. It was new paint, Federal Standard Color, 33538. That night, Ruth called. They're trying to push you into losing your temper, she said. Don't give them what they want. She was right. I kept calm, building my case one absurdity at a time. Knowledge nugget number 1. Under Federal Postal Regulations, USPS Manual, ISH 632.52, an HOA cannot dictate the color or style of mailboxes if they meet federal standards. I copied that line into an email to Linda and CC'd the board. Her reply was one sentence. Stop harassing us with pseudo-legal nonsense. PC, pseudo-legal. That one word lit something in me. I spent the weekend researching their insurance. Turns out the HOA carried a directors and officers liability policy, coverage cap $2 million, underwritten by a firm in Charlotte. If a board acts in bad faith or knowingly violates law, that policy evaporates. So I drafted my own notice of potential claim, formal and polite, citing selective enforcement, harassment, and breach of fiduciary duty. I copied their insurer's compliance address. Tom read it and said, "Beautiful, you just lit the fuse." Before I sent it, I paused over the subject line, then typed, Notice of Intent to Protect Rights, Daniel Price, North Lake Restoration, LLC. By Monday, their tone changed. 2 board members emailed privately. Maybe we can talk this out. I saved the messages, said nothing. Midweek, Linda escalated again. She called for an emergency meeting regarding unauthorized property claim. When I arrived, there were 2 uniformed officers standing by the podium. She pointed at me and declared, "That man is trespassing on HOA land." I set my briefcase on the table, slow enough for everyone to see the stamped deed folder inside. "Officer," I said, "you'll find that parcel legally conveyed under deed number 247811, recorded in county records. I'm the managing member of the holding entity." One officer took the papers, glanced at his partner and said, "Ma'am, this checks out. It's public record." The room erupted. Someone shouted, "Then who owns the beach?" Linda's face went pale. "He can't. He just can't." The officer turned back. "He can, ma'am. Unless the HOA contests in civil court, there's nothing criminal here." I watched the power drain from her like water through sand. That was reversal number 1, though I didn't call it that yet. All I knew was, for the first time, she looked small. Later, outside under the sodium lights, Ruth touched at my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "Not yet," I said. "Now we make it mean something." Because owning that strip gave me more than safety. It gave me choice. Control of the access point everyone else used to reach the water. And I knew I wouldn't shut it down. I'd use it to expose how deep the rot went. Before heading home, I posted a quiet message on the community board. Residents interested in open access and fair rules, meet at the pavilion Saturday 4 p.m. No accusations, no drama, just an invitation. And they came, 23 homeowners, some I'd never spoken to. They told stories, landscaping fines, late fee padding, denied variance requests. I took notes, logged names, cross-referenced dates. Tom stood by the picnic table, recording with consent slips signed by each participant. Midway through, Ruth leaned over. "You ever think of running the board?" I smiled. "No, but maybe it's time someone who reads the bylaws actually sits on it." That night, as I closed the binder labeled evidence, the rain started tapping the windows. I thought of my wife, her voice soft in my memory. "Keep the lake honest, Danny." For the first time in months, I felt I was. The following week, Linda doubled down. A mass email went out accusing me of organizing an anti-association faction and threatening disciplinary measures for unauthorized gatherings on HOA property. The irony almost made me laugh. My unauthorized gathering had been on my own easement. Still, her tone told me something important. She was scared, but she still believed intimidation worked. I printed every email, stapled them chronologically, and numbered each one. Page after page of subtle threats, manipulative phrasing, and small-town tyranny disguised as policy enforcement. The stack grew thick enough to need a binder clip. By now, the community was whispering. People stopped avoiding me at the mailbox. A few even started copying me on their complaint letters. One neighbor, Brian, showed me a notice about his kid's basketball hoop being non-compliant with aesthetic standards. I checked the bylaws. The rule applied only to permanent fixtures visible from the street. His was removable and sat in the backyard. Selective enforcement again. Knowledge nugget number 1. When an HOA inconsistently enforces covenants, affected homeowners can raise a selective enforcement defense, often nullifying fines or penalties if they can prove others were treated differently under identical conditions. It felt good arming neighbors with facts. Not anger. Facts. That's what Linda hated most. Facts leave no room for control. At Tom's advice, I began compiling what he called the timeline of malice, a running log of actions, dates, and actors. Every letter received, every statement made, every fine issued. Ruth volunteered to help, flipping through old meeting minutes she'd saved for years. They never thought anyone would read these twice, she said, marking entries with yellow tabs. Buried in those minutes, on January 10, 2023, we found a line. Motion passed to delegate landscaping contract to Markham Property Services, LLC. That was Linda's husband's company. Conflict of interest in black and white. I stared at that sentence, fingers tightening on the page. She voted on this? Yep, Ruth said, and signed the disbursement. That gave us a new vector. HOA law was one thing. Fiduciary duty was another. I dug deeper, cross-checking county business filings. The contract totaled $84,000 per year, paid directly from residents' dues. The same dues she used to threaten everyone with liens. I printed it all and added a tab labeled Conflict Evidence. By early June, my quiet gathering had turned into a movement. We called ourselves the Open Lake Coalition. Nothing official, just neighbors meeting every Saturday. Someone made coffee, someone brought donuts. We discussed transparency, access, reform. I never once used the word revenge, but everyone knew this wasn't just about paint colors anymore. During one meeting, a man named Caleb Dunn, former county code inspector, raised his hand. I still got my credentials, he said. If you want a compliance audit, I can check those common areas. Purely informational. I didn't hesitate. Do it, I said. 3 days later, Caleb emailed me 14 photographs. Broken drainage grates, unpermitted storage shed, safety lights out for months, all on HOA-managed property. Each photo stamped with date and GPS coordinates. We now had proof that while they hounded homeowners for tiny infractions, their own assets violated municipal codes. The moment I saw those images, I knew we had leverage layered on leverage. Late that night, as I was backing up files to an external drive, my security camera pinged. Motion detected. Front drive, 11:23 p.m. I opened the live feed. 2 silhouettes near my fence line, one holding a flashlight. They turned toward the lens, faces obscured by hoods, then hurried off when the floodlight kicked in. I printed the screenshot, timestamp visible, and added it to the binder. For the first time, I locked my bedroom door before sleeping. The next morning, Ruth brought me coffee. "They're trying to rattle you," she said. "Don't let them." "I'm fine," I lied. Truth was, the house felt heavier now, quiet in the wrong way. My wife's framed photo on the mantel seemed to watch over me, reminding me what this was for. Not just my property, everyone's right to peace in their own home. That night I drafted the next move. Tom would send a formal demand for records under state HOA transparency statutes, financials, contracts, meeting minutes, bank statements. I proofed the letter myself, making sure it read like a scalpel, not a hammer. When we served it, Linda responded with a smirk. "Our records are private." Tom leaned forward. "Not under Para 44-3231 of the Georgia Property Owners Association Act," he said. "You, HOA, have 10 business days to comply." She laughed. "Or what? Or you explain your refusal to the State Compliance Bureau," Tom replied. That was the moment I saw her composure slip again, just slightly. She thought no one would ever call her bluff. A week later, I got an envelope stuffed with what looked like random printouts, half pages missing, several items blacked out. One of them, however, was gold, a payment authorization signed L. Markham for Community Equipment Replacement Fund, $12,450. No invoice, no recipient, just a line item. When I asked in writing where that money went, I received an email saying, "Misplaced records are not evidence of wrongdoing." That sentence, word for word, became the tagline of the exposé draft Tom and I began writing. Late one night, Caleb called me. "You ever think about what happens if this blows up?" "All the time," I said. "But it's not about blowing up. It's about cleaning up." He laughed raspy. "You sound like an engineer." Guilty. We started preparing for the HOA's annual meeting, scheduled for August 2nd. That's when board elections and the annual budget vote would occur. Tom called it the public set piece. Until then, our job was simple: stay lawful, stay quiet, and keep documenting. As the date approached, I could feel the tension in the air, neighbors whispering near mailboxes, cars pausing a little longer when passing my gate. It felt like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. Before turning in that night, I posted a question on our private group page, casual on the surface, but meant to stir thought. How far should an HOA control your porch, lawn, or decor? Where's the line between community and control? Comment what you'd tolerate, or at least like the video if you've had enough of this nonsense. Then I closed my laptop and stared out at the lake. The reflection of my dock light shimmered like Asha, a promise I intended to keep. By the end of July, the neighborhood had split clean down the middle. On one side were the rule keepers, the ones who liked the illusion of order that Linda promised. On the other, the rest of us, tired homeowners who just wanted to mow our lawns without measuring the grass. Every morning felt like a small standoff. The air buzzed with gossip. The bulletin board looked like a campaign wall. Tom kept reminding me, "Stay civil, Danny. The first one who loses temper loses credibility." So I made a point of smiling, waving, being relentlessly polite. It drove them crazy. The meeting notice finally came. Annual session, August 2nd, 6:00 p.m., Clubhouse Hall. The agenda listed budget ratification and access policy review. That last line was their coded attempt to reclaim my newly acquired strip of land. I spent the next few nights crafting a presentation, charts, copies of deeds, highlighted statutes. I wanted every second to matter. Ruth helped me laminate key documents. "People trust plastic," she said, sliding another sheet through the hot roller. On July 30th, 3 days before the meeting, another envelope appeared in my mailbox. Inside was a single page. "Final warning. Continued obstruction of association operations will result in legal action." No signature. Just typed initials. LM. I brought it straight to Tom. "That's retaliation," he said, dropping the paper into a new file folder marked Exhibit 9. Threats. He took a sip from his thermos. "They're panicking. Good." But the pressure wasn't just administrative anymore. That night, someone loosened the screws on my dock light, enough that it flickered like a distress signal. I replaced them, hands shaking, trying not to imagine what could come next. The next morning, Caleb texted, "Got the maintenance records. You'll want to see this." He met me at the diner down the road, slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were repair logs showing that Linda's husband's company billed for services never performed. Drain cleanings, fence repainting, even shoreline debris removal in February when the lake had been frozen. I stared at the numbers. "That's fraud." He nodded. "Or theft, depending on how you spin it." We both knew what this meant. The annual meeting wouldn't just be about votes. It would be a reckoning. Still, I needed to make sure everything I said there would stand up under scrutiny. So I called the county's code enforcement office, explained I'd found maintenance irregularities. The clerk, a woman named Marcia, said she'd log a preliminary review. "We'll send someone to observe the meeting," she added, "just to keep things orderly." That was exactly what I wanted, a neutral authority in the room. When August 2nd arrived, the sky turned the color of pewter. Thunder rolled low across the lake. The clubhouse parking lot overflowed with cars. I walked in carrying 2 binders, evidence and leverage. Linda stood by the podium, flanked by her husband and a couple of board loyalists. Her smile was all enamel. "Mr. Price," she said, "we'll handle public comments at the end." I nodded. "I'm happy to wait my turn." They started with budget figures, talking in circles about unforeseen expenditures. Then came the access policy item. Linda cleared her throat. Due to confusion over property boundaries, the board proposes reasserting HOA control over the shared lakefront, including all adjoining easements. I raised my hand. Point of order, those easements aren't shared. One is owned privately. You don't own community access, she snapped. Actually, I said, opening the binder, North Lake Restoration LLC does. Recorded May 3rd, deed number 247811. That's me. The murmurs started again, louder this time. Linda turned red. This is nonsense. I slid a laminated page onto paper. The table, the official county parcel map, highlighted boundaries, and the stamped signature from the clerk's office. This isn't nonsense. It's geometry and law. Then I took a breath and handed over the maintenance records Caleb had found. While you've been policing mailbox paint, your own contractor, Markham Property Services, has billed the community for phantom work. These are invoices from February and March, showing full payment for jobs never completed. That's misappropriation of funds. Her husband stood up. Watch your mouth. Sit down, sir, said a calm voice near the door. It was Officer Boyd, the same cop from the earlier noise complaint. Uniform neat, arms crossed. County's observing tonight. Linda froze. This is a private meeting. Public under state open records law when discussing budgetary matters, he replied. Proceed. It was perfect. The room felt charged, everyone waiting to see who would blink first. Linda tried to pivot, talking about intentions and clerical oversight, but the spell had broken. I stepped up to the microphone. For months, this board fined residents for trivialities while ignoring its own violations. The lake lights are out, the drainage is clogged, and the HOA's DO insurance could be voided under Section 3.4 if willful misconduct is proven. I'd rather not see that happen, so here's what I propose. Transparency, independent audit, and elections with term limits. The crowd murmured approval. Someone clapped. Ruth whispered, "You've got them." Linda slammed her folder shut. "Motion denied," she said. "Board authority stands." But before she could gavel out, Officer Boyd spoke again. "Actually, ma'am, given the conflicts disclosed tonight, I'm required to document this for the county ethics liaison. You might want to consult counsel before taking any further votes." The sound of that gavel never came. Linda just stood there, hand frozen midair. That was the sound of the first domino tilting. Outside, as thunder cracked and the rain began to fall, Ruth smiled at me under her umbrella. "So, what happens now?" I looked at the line of taillights leaving the lot. Now we let the facts dry and see who slips first. Before heading home, I posted another thought on the group page. Fines or fairness? $250, $500, $1,000. Where do you draw the line between community standards and pure revenue schemes? Drop your answer below. Then I shut my phone off and watched the rain beat on my windshield, each droplet catching a streetlight like a miniature gavel coming down. The morning after the meeting, I woke to quiet. No new citations taped to the fence, no email blasts with my name in the subject line. The silence was almost eerie, like the HOA had swallowed its own tongue. I poured coffee and opened my binder just to remind myself none of it was a dream. The deeds, the logs, the invoices, all still there. By noon, that silence cracked. My neighbor Brian called, voice shaking with laughter. "Danny, they pulled down the HOA website. Gone. Every page says under maintenance." That was the first signal they were retreating behind the curtain, rewriting the story. I told Tom, who said, "They're sanitizing records. Save screenshots of every cached page you can find." I did, printing each one until the ink cartridge ran dry. But retreat doesn't mean surrender. 2 days later, new letters appeared, different letterhead this time, from the HOA's law firm. Cease and desist from disseminating defamatory statements. It accused me of damaging the association's reputation. Tom grinned when he read it. They just admitted the facts are true enough to hurt. He drafted a calm, surgical response. "We welcome litigation and discovery, particularly of financials the board has withheld. We sent it certified." That same week, the retaliation escalated again, this time uglier. Someone vandalized the Open Lake Coalition's bulletin, spray painting traitors across 2 plywood. Caleb found nails scattered at the entrance of my driveway. Ruth's garden hose was sliced clean through. I sat on my porch that night, listening to the crickets and the hum of my security system. The house felt smaller under that tension, like the walls were holding their breath with me. I thought of my wife again, her quiet faith that decency would win out if you stayed steady. The next morning, I found something new. A yellow slip tucked under my wiper blade. Anonymous tip, it read, HOA plans emergency vote to void easement ownership, Monday, 7 p.m. No signature, but the handwriting was neat, deliberate. Maybe someone on the inside had finally had enough. Tom checked the statutes. They can't void a recorded deed, not without a court order, he said. But they can sure make noise pretending they can. So we planned. We'd let them hold their vote, then show up with every piece of proof lined up and ready. Caleb prepared inspection photos of HOA property hazards. Ruth compiled a list of residents willing to testify. I filed fresh copies of all evidence at the county clerk's office, 2 stamped boxes labeled Lake Serenity HOA Compliance Audit. That weekend, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me glance at the cameras. One night around midnight, motion alert. 2 people near the dock again. I hit record, zoomed in. One was definitely male, the other smaller, hoodie pulled tight. They backed off after the floodlight flashed, but one figure turned briefly toward the camera. Even grainy, I recognized the posture. Linda's husband. I gave the clip to Officer Boyd the next morning. He whistled low. Trespassing after dark on posted private property? That's a misdemeanor. I'll file the report. I thanked him. He patted the roof of his cruiser. You're doing this the right way, Mr. Price. Keep everything clean. That night, I typed a note at the top of my evidence log. Stay lawful, stay patient, stay human. Monday arrived heavy with humidity. The meeting was set for 7 p.m. I arrived at 6:50, wearing a blue button-down and carrying the 2 binders that had become extensions of my arms. The room buzzed with tension. Maybe 60 residents, folding chairs scraping tile. Linda sat at the front again, her husband at her side, both flanked by their attorney. She opened briskly. We're here to address unlawful interference with association assets. Tom leaned close to me. Let her say it. She gestured toward a projected map. The disputed easement must revert to HOA oversight for safety reasons. This motion, if passed, will authorize our council to reclaim it. I stood slowly, waiting for her to notice me. Before you vote, I said, may I clarify one point? Her attorney sneered. You're not recognized. Tom stepped forward. Under open meeting statutes, any homeowner may request factual clarification. Linda glared but nodded curtly. Briefly, I placed a single page on the podium, the official certified deed, plus Officer Boyd's incident report of trespass filed the previous night. The HOA can't reclaim what it never owned, I said, and any attempt to enter that property again without consent will constitute criminal trespass under OCGA, 16 to 7 to 21. Gasps rippled through the room. The attorney's face twitched. Linda's knuckles whitened. Additionally, I continued, I've filed evidence of financial irregularities, $84,000 in undisclosed payments, to the State Compliance Bureau. The report includes all signatures. I clicked the binder shut. The sound echoed like a hammer. For a second, you could hear nothing but the hum of the projector fan. Then Linda's husband muttered, he's bluffing. Officer Boyd, standing by the doorway again, said quietly, no sir, he's not. I delivered a copy of that report this afternoon. That was the second audible gasp, the kind that changes everything. I turned back toward the crowd. His isn't about one homeowner or one fine. It's about trust. You can't demand accountability from residents while hiding your own books. Someone started clapping, then another, then the whole room. Linda slammed the gavel. Meeting adjourned. But people kept clapping anyway. Outside, under the flickering porch light, Ruth handed me a thermos of coffee and whispered, they're finished, you know. Not yet, I said. They'll fight on paper next. She smiled. Then let's make the paper ours. That night, I posted a question for everyone who'd watched the video later. How would you fight it? Buy leverage like we did, or head straight to court? Tell me what you'd do. Then I sat by the window, binder open, listening to the crickets again. The lake was calm, but I could feel the current shifting beneath. By mid-August, the board's lawyer had gone silent. No more letters, no new urgent memos. It was the calm that comes after a house of cards collapses, but before anyone admits it's over. Tom said, "Give them rope," and that's what I did. Behind the scenes, the county's ethics office opened its review. The insurance underwriter requested documentation of potential fraud exposure. Within days, whispers spread that the HOA's policy had been suspended pending investigation. The Markham's safety net had vanished. Linda tried one last move. She posted a notice calling for voluntary property access for inspection. Residents ignored it. The only signature she got was her husband's. The following week, 3 board members resigned citing health reasons. Ruth called it the sound of rats leaving the ark. Meanwhile, the Open Lake Coalition kept growing. Families that hadn't spoken in years were meeting again over coffee and folded bylaws. Caleb's audits kept landing blows: unpaid lighting fees, missing permit renewals, a forgotten erosion control order from 2019. We were turning paperwork into a spotlight. Then came the letter that proved the leverage had teeth. The county property office confirmed in writing, Parcel 17B remains titled to North Lake Restoration LLC, and no adverse claim has been filed. I held the envelope up to the porch light like it was a certificate of survival. Reversal number 1 had become irreversible. Visual beat number 1. I walked down to the dock that night, wind sharp off the water, and drove a small brass marker into the post. Private access, North Lake Restoration LLC. The metal rang once, clear and final. I filmed it for record, timestamp glowing blue in the corner. Tom called the next morning. "You realize you control their choke point. Every rule they enforce about the lake has to pass over your dirt first." "Yeah," I said. "And we're not shutting the gate. We're opening it." That's when the real plan started forming. Use ownership not to punish, but to rebuild. I drafted what I called the Community Charter Proposal: open records, independent audits, public minutes, and capped fines at $200 per incident unless a supermajority approved higher. We scheduled a community vote for late September, advertised with plain flyers. Transparency isn't rebellion, it's maintenance. Linda showed up at my driveway one evening before that vote. No visor this time, no entourage, just her and a clipboard she wasn't holding steady. "You've made a mess," she said. "I cleaned one," I answered. "You don't understand how hard I've worked for this place." "Then you should have protected it better." Her eyes darted toward the lake. "You think the county will save you? They'll forget this in a month." "Maybe," I said, "but everything's on record now. Records don't forget." She left without another word, tires crunching gravel like slow applause. A week later, a reporter from the Atlanta Ledger called. Someone, probably Ruth, had tipped them off. "We're doing a piece on HOA corruption and reform," he said. "Can we quote you on the ownership transfer?" "Quote the documents," I said. "They speak better than I do." The article ran online within 48 hours. Local homeowner exposes HOA misconduct, secures easement control. It spread fast. Comments poured in, half praise, half disbelief. One caught my eye. Finally, someone used the system instead of breaking it. But the story wasn't finished yet. The investigation triggered a wave of paperwork, subpoenas, insurer questionnaires, and a formal audit notice addressed to every remaining board member. Tom's office filled with bankers' boxes. He called it the domino room. Knowledge nugget number 2. Under most state statutes, if an HOA's officers engage in financial misconduct, their director's officer's policy can be rescinded, exposing each officer to personal civil liability. The dominoes began to fall. The Markhams sold their house within 3 weeks. Their names disappeared from the directory. Rumor had it they'd moved to Florida. By early September, the HOA held an emergency session, public this time, led by interim chair Helen Fry, a soft-spoken accountant who kept wiping her glasses. "We can't function under the old bylaws," she admitted. "We need reform." That was the opening I'd been waiting for. Ruth and Caleb flanked me as I stood. "We've already drafted one," I said, sliding the charter proposal across the table. Helen scanned the first page. "Term limits, audits, capped fines, open meetings?" "Exactly. And all minutes posted online within 10 days. She looked up. "You'd trade your parcel rights for this?" "If it guarantees transparency for everyone," I said. "Yes." That was reversal number 2 in embryo, trading control for reform. but it had to mature under light. We scheduled the ratification for September 28th, a Saturday. Local news promised coverage. Officer Boyd volunteered to attend as a witness again. The night before, I could barely sleep. The house hummed with that strange quiet before change. As dawn broke, I posted one more discussion to the channel page. For trespass, harassment, or fraud by HOA officials, what punishment fits? Should they face community service, fines, or removal for life? Drop your thoughts. Then I closed my laptop, brewed coffee, and watched fog drift off the lake like a curtain about to rise. The next act would decide if all of this ended in reform or just revenge. By the time the sun dropped behind the tree line that evening, the clubhouse parking lot was overflowing again. Only this time, the energy was different. Less suspicion, more curiosity. The banner on the door read, "Special Session, Community Charter Vote." I carried no binders tonight, just one folder and a quiet sense that the story had turned a corner. Inside, Helen stood at the front with a single microphone, voice steady but nervous. "We'll hear both sides briefly before we vote," she said. "Then, per procedure, Officer Boyd will tally and witness the results." His uniform gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He gave me a small nod from the back. I stepped to the podium. For months, we've lived under a cloud of fear and fines. We've seen what happens when authority forgets accountability. I don't want an HOA that vanishes. I want one that works, transparently. I held up the charter. Every provision here was written with input from the people sitting in this room. It's not anti-association, it's pro-community. Someone from the audience shouted, "Does this mean lower dues?" "Eventually, yes," I said. "But more importantly, it means no more secret votes, no more phantom invoices, no more intimidation letters." The applause that followed wasn't wild, it was solid, like a roof beam locking into place. Then a figure rose from the back, one of the last remaining board loyalists, Gary Hunt, former treasurer. "I'll grant you found problems," he said, "but self-governance requires trust in laws. If every angry homeowner gets a say, we'll drown in opinions." He wasn't wrong, and the crowd murmured agreement. I met his eyes. "Then let's drown in sunlight instead of secrecy. If you fear transparency, you're not protecting the community, you're protecting yourself." That line landed. Ruth whispered, "Nice swing." Helen raised the motion to adopt the charter. "All in favor, raise your hand." Hands went up slowly, then steadily, row after row. Boyd walked through with a clipboard, counting. 42 for, 9 against, he said at last. Helen smiled faintly. "Motion carries." The room exhaled as one. Boyd signed the witness line, date stamped September 28th, 2024, 7:42 p.m. He handed the form to Helen. "You're official now," he said. Visual beat number 2. Outside, in the cool night air, Helen taped that signed document to the clubhouse door. The porch light caught the fresh ink, rain beginning to mist around us. Cameras flashed. It looked like something out of a civics textbook. Reporters cornered me in the parking lot. "What happens to the lake parcel now?" one asked. "I'll be deeding it to the HOA once the reforms are recorded," I said. "Transparency isn't a prize you hoard. It's a system you build." Tom stepped up beside me, briefcase in hand. "You just rewrote the rules," he whispered. "Think your wife would approve?" I looked over the lake, moonlight breaking through clouds. She'd probably say it took me long enough. The next week was a cascade of consequences. The State Ethics Bureau released its findings. No criminal charges, but clear evidence of breach of fiduciary duties. The insurer confirmed policy termination. The Markhams were barred from serving on any registered HOA board for 5 years. The new board announced an external audit to be published publicly by December. Knowledge nugget number 3. Most states allow homeowners to petition for removal of HOA officers with a 51% vote. Once misconduct is verified, re-4 Misses can be codified via amended covenants, enforceable like contracts. The local paper ran a follow-up. Lake Serenity adopts transparency charter after months of turmoil. For the first time, the word turmoil didn't sting. It felt earned. I spent that weekend cleaning the dock. The brass plaque I'd nailed weeks earlier caught the sun. My grandson helped me tighten one of the bolts, asking, "Grandma's lake again?" "Yeah," I said, "ours again." That evening, Ruth came by with a folder full of sign-up sheets. "Community Day planning," she said. "We're going to repaint the picnic tables. This time, everyone gets to choose the color." "Even cedar brown?" I asked. "Especially cedar brown." We laughed until the light faded. Before turning in that night, I posted one more thought to the page. How far should an HOA's power reach? Should they govern like a council, or just manage like a service? Leave your thoughts. The country's watching. As I set my phone down, the lake reflected the first stars. Peace didn't roar back all at once. It trickled in, the way water finds its level. The fight had started with a dock stain and ended with a community stained clean. The morning after the vote, I woke before sunrise. The air smelled like rain and wet cedar. From my kitchen window, I could see the lake, calm again, the surface perfectly smooth. For the first time in nearly a year, I didn't feel watched. No patrol trucks creeping by, no letters waiting on the gate. Just silence and the sound of my coffee maker clicking on. At 8:00 a.m., Helen called. "The county clerk recorded the new charter at 7:46, she said. "You did it." "No," I told her. "We did it." That afternoon, I walked to the community board and replaced the vandalized bulletin with a new one. Community Day, Saturday, October 12th. Bring paint, tools, and ideas. The word HOA was nowhere on the flyer, just Lake Seas, Renity. By noon, kids were already sketching color swatches on scrap paper, arguing over which blue matched the sky. Ruth organized a sign-up table. Caleb brought sound equipment, and Tom rolled up in jeans and a baseball cap, laughing that he didn't remember the last time he saw this many people smiling at a civic event. Visual beat number 3. We painted the old picnic tables together. The smell of fresh latex and coffee hung in the air. When I brushed on that first stripe of cedar brown, the same color that started it all, everyone cheered. A few people took photos. Someone played an old country song through a Bluetooth speaker, and for a while that's all it was. Neighbors working shoulder to shoulder. Later, Helen stood on the small stage we'd built from spare planks and read the new charter aloud. Every clause echoed the values we'd fought for: public records, term limits, open finances, and capped fines. When she finished, Boyd, now off duty just in jeans and a windbreaker, held up a stamped copy and said, "County's filed this in full compliance. You're official." The crowd applauded again. Ruth leaned close and said, "She'd be proud of you, Danny." "She'd say I took the scenic route," I replied. Tom joined us, wiping paint from his fingers. "The charter includes a clause for community education, right?" "Yep," I said. "Workshops twice a year. First one's about homeowners' rights." He grinned. "Mind if I guest lecture?" "Only if you bring donuts." Knowledge nugget number 4. Once an HOA adopts open records provisions into its covenants, those terms bind future boards under contract law. Violations can be enforced by any member through civil court or arbitration. By evening, the lake shimmered with lanterns reflecting off the water. The kids launched paper boats, each one marked with a single word: fairness, trust, kindness. Mine said promise. It drifted slow but steady, the walos. A healing always does. When the last lantern faded, I gathered my tools and walked back home. The binder that once held my evidence now sat empty on the porch table. I thumbed through it anyway, feeling its weight, then slid the brass plaque from the dock into the final sleeve, proof not of ownership, but of completion. That night, I sat down to record one final note for HOA Society. If you believe I fought the right way, and that this is how these stories should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend, or someone who's still fighting their own HOA. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And as responsible neighbors, share this story so others learn how to stand firm without crossing the line. That part's on us. A week later, the Atlanta Ledger printed a small follow-up. Lake Serenity, HOA rebrands as Lake Serenity Community Council. First audit confirms full compliance and 14% dues rollback. Below it, a smaller note read, "Former HOA officers agree to probationary community service. New charter praised as state model." I clipped the article and tucked it beside my wife's photo on the mantel. Outside, porch light on, lake calm again, I whispered, "Kept my promise." And as I closed the door, I thought, not about revenge, not about victory, but about what we'd built from the wreckage. A neighborhood that finally remembered what the word community meant. Next case? Maybe someone else's lake, someone else's fight. But the rule stays the same. Sunlight is the best reform there is.